When I was 17, my parents decided I would marry my 28-year-old cousin to preserve the purity of our blood. But when I found my grandmother's diary filled with stories of girls who vanished after trying to escape, they came into my room with a syringe. When I turned 17, my parents told me I'd be marrying my cousin Thomas the day after graduation. They said it like they were announcing a birthday party, not a life sentence. My mother, always composed, brushed invisible lint off her pearl blouse and said, "It's time to preserve what our ancestors built." My father nodded, like this was some business deal instead of my body they were signing away. Thomas was 28. He'd been hovering around me since I was 12. Soft smiles that made my skin crawl. Family bonding drives that always ended with him talking about how lucky I was to be chosen. He'd tell me about our superior genes, about how the bloodline had to remain strong. I didn't understand back then. I just knew something about the way he said breed instead of love made me feel sick. Our house looked normal from the outside. White columns, fresh cut lawn, cross above the mantel. But inside, it was a museum of delusion. Old portraits of ancestors my parents called founding stock. Charts on the walls showing which cousins had married which, color-coded by genetic success. My dad, a geneticist who'd been fired from 3 universities, ran experiments in the basement. My mom, sweet church mom, recorded the results in a ledger that looked more like a breeding manual than a family tree. When I asked why Thomas couldn't just marry someone else, Mom laughed. "You're the optimal female," she said, like she was reading a lab report. "Perfect symmetry, high fertility index. You should be proud. Proud for being a womb in waiting." They started preparing me after my birthday. Vitamins, purity checks, appointments with an unlicensed doctor who kept calling me Subject A17. He said I was optimal for childbearing. My parents looked at each other and smiled. That was the first time I realized I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was inventory. Thomas began visiting weekly, sitting across from me at dinner, like a predator waiting for permission to eat. He'd trace his finger along the rim of his glass while saying things like, "Our firstborn will be strong. Maybe a boy first, then twins." My mother would beam like it was a prayer. I tried to tell my teachers, but my parents had already poisoned the well, told the school I was fragile, prone to lies. They donated enough money that nobody wanted to risk drama. Even my older brother shrugged it off. He'd married our second cousin last year. "It's tradition, Em," he said, like tradition excused incest and captivity. By then, I'd started sleeping with my shoes on, just in case I had to run. The night my mom handed me a white dress and said, "Try this on, sweetheart. Thomas wants you to look pure." I stared at my reflection in the mirror and thought, this isn't a wedding, it's a funeral, and I was the sacrifice. The dress still hangs in my memory like a ghost, lace choking my throat, the fabric stiff and old enough to have seen other girls die in it. I asked where it came from, and Mom said, softly, almost lovingly, "Your grandmother wore it when she married her cousin, too." That was the first time I realized this wasn't just about me. It was a system, a cycle. Our attic was full of family relics, boxes labeled by generations. I started sneaking up there when Mom was gardening, pretending to clean, while really searching for something, anything that proved I wasn't crazy. That's when I found the diary, hidden behind a stack of brittle hymnals wrapped in yellowed lace. My grandmother's handwriting slanted and sharp, like she'd been shaking when she wrote it. The first page said, "If you found this, you're in danger." She described everything. The forced marriages, the correction procedures, the girls who disappeared. One entry stopped my breath cold. 3 aunts had tried to escape and came back, broken, unable to have children. Another cousin fell in love with a boy outside the family and died in an accident 2 weeks later. Every few pages, my grandmother's writing got more frantic, like she knew someone was watching. The last entry said, "They will kill you before they let you contaminate the bloodline." I didn't sleep that night. Every sound felt like footsteps on the stairs. Thomas started visiting more often. My parents called it bonding before the ceremony. He brought me books about genetics, underlined passages about hereditary strength and selective breeding. Sometimes he'd touch my hair, slow and possessive, saying, "You're going to make such perfect children." I'd sit there frozen, counting seconds until it was over. When I tried to tell Mom I didn't want this, she slapped me across the face so hard my ear rang. "You will honor your family," she hissed. "Do you think you're better than us?" Dad stood behind her, silent but nodding. His approval was worse than the slap. That's when the plan began. Quietly, carefully, I used Grandma's diary to contact one of the names she'd written, a woman named Rachel. She'd escaped years ago and lived under a new identity. The code was simple, a postcard to a P.O. box with a symbol only another runaway would recognize. Rachel wrote back within a week. "We can get you out. Wait for the signal." For the first time in months, I felt something close to hope. But hope can make you careless. Because the night before Rachel was supposed to come, my father walked into my room, holding the diary. His face was calm, too calm. "I think you've been reading stories that don't belong to you," he said. Behind him, I saw Thomas step into the doorway, holding a syringe. The syringe gleamed under the hallway light, clear liquid, steady hand. My father's voice was calm, almost soothing, the way he used to talk to our dog before taking it to the vet for a final sleep. "Emma," he said, "you've been agitated, confused. We just want to help you relax before the ceremony." The ceremony? They weren't even pretending it was a wedding anymore. Thomas stepped closer, his face all false tenderness. "It'll be easier if you don't fight, just a little prick, and when you wake up, everything will be taken care of." My body reacted before my brain did. I kicked the nightstand into him and bolted for the door. My mother appeared at the end of the hall, holding restraints, real ones. Thick leather cuffs with metal buckles. Don't make this harder, she begged, but her eyes were wild, desperate. You're too important to ruin the line now. I ran past her, shoving her shoulder, hearing her fall against the wall. My father shouted for Thomas to grab me, and I flew down the stairs barefoot, heart slamming against my ribs so hard I could taste blood. The front door was locked, deadbolt chain, both. I spun toward the back when Thomas's hand clamped around my wrist. He was stronger, but panic made me wild. I grabbed the nearest thing, a glass figurine from the hallway table, and smashed it against his temple. He screamed, staggering, blood trickling down his cheek. I ran, through the kitchen, out the back door, across the lawn. Gravel sliced my feet, branches tore my arms, but I didn't stop until I reached the woods behind our property. I hid under the old creek bridge, shivering, trying to steady my breathing. The phone in my pocket buzzed once. Rachel's code. I'm here. She pulled up 5 minutes later in a dented gray Honda, headlights off. I limped toward her, every muscle screaming. She didn't say a word, just opened the passenger door. The moment I shut it, she hit the gas, tires spitting gravel. Behind us, I saw flashlights, cutting through the dark. My father's voice echoed faintly across the trees. Bring her back alive. She's the last pure one. Rachel drove in silence for nearly an hour before speaking. You did good, Emma. They can't track you now. We'll get you safe. But as we reached the state line, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Headlights in the mirror. A black SUV, steady, too close. Rachel cursed under her breath. They found us faster than I thought. That's when I realized my father's obsession with control went beyond bloodlines. He'd been experimenting with implants in his genetic research. And somewhere under my skin, something was still telling him exactly where I was. Rachel's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The road twisted through dark pine woods, headlights slicing through rain. I pressed a hand to my ankle. It hurt, throbbing. Where I'd landed wrong during my escape. And for a split second I thought I felt something hard under the skin. A lump. Metal hard. They tagged you, Rachel muttered, reading my face like she's seen it before. Your dad's been implanting trackers for years. Some girls didn't even know until it was too late. The headlights behind us grew brighter, closer. What do we do? I asked, my voice cracking. Rachel took a sharp turn down a dirt road, tires skidding. We make them lose signal. She drove until we reached an abandoned quarry, the kind of place where no cell tower dared reach. The air smelled of rust and wet stone. She parked under a cliff overhang, cut the engine, and rummaged through a duffel bag. Hold still, she said, pulling out a small knife and a bottle of antiseptic. Wait, what? We have to get it out now, Emma. I bit down on my sleeve as she sliced my ankle open, quick and precise. Fire ripped through my leg, then metal. A tiny chip, blood slick between her fingers. She crushed it under a rock, and for the first time since I'd run, I felt something close to control again. We stayed in that quarry until sunrise, hidden beneath layers of fog. Rachel told me about the others, girls who'd escaped families like mine. Some had been caught again, some vanished completely. There's a real network, she said softly. Safe houses, lawyers, people in law enforcement who believe us, but there's also a fake one. Families who pretend to help girls, then sell them back. You have to be careful who you trust. I nodded, clutching my grandmother's diary against my chest. The pages were stained with blood, mine and hers now. By the time the sun rose, Rachel had arranged to move me to a safe house 2 states away. We switched cars at a truck stop, trading the gray Honda for a blue sedan with a note on the dash, for E, good luck. As we drove, the radio crackled with local news. My parents were already on TV, crying about their missing daughter who'd been taken by a cult. Rachel laughed bitterly. They always flip the script. The ones doing the hunting call themselves the victims. That night, we stopped at a diner. I stared at my reflection in the window, pale, bruised, barefoot in borrowed clothes, and barely recognized the girl looking back. Then the waitress turned up the volume on the TV. My father was on screen, standing beside Thomas, his hand on a Bible. We forgive whoever took her, he said solemnly, but we will bring Emma home. Rachel froze mid-bite. They've mobilized the network, she whispered. I didn't understand what she meant until I saw it. Flashes of familiar faces on the news, distant cousins, church elders. They were all smiling, calm, organized. They weren't just looking for me, they were hunting me. I didn't think I'd ever post an update, but the last 48 hours have been insane, and I feel like I'm losing my grip on what's real. Some of you DM'd me saying my story felt like a movie. I wish it was. It's my life. After Rachel got the chip out, we made it to a small apartment used by the network in another state. It wasn't fancy. Bare walls, a futon, a single window. But for the first night since I'd found Grandma's diary, I slept without shoes on. Rachel sat at the kitchen table going through burner phones, whispering into each one. She kept saying cross-reference and code green, like we were in some spy movie. The next morning she woke me up early. We have to leave now, she said. They already know this address. She didn't even have to explain how. My father had cousins in law enforcement. Thomas had friends everywhere. They'd already put out a story that Rachel was a cult recruiter who brainwashed me. Her face was on the local news with the word kidnapper under it. We left through the back stairwell and switched cars again. A white minivan this time, donated by another survivor named Carol. She didn't ask questions, just handed over the keys. I tried to say thank you, but my voice cracked. We drove for hours down, back roads, passing hand-painted signs for gun shows and Bible camps. At a gas station, Rachel bought me sneakers and a hoodie so I'd look less like a runaway. When she handed them over, her hands were shaking. They're activating the fake network, she said. They'll plant people who act like allies, grandparents, counselors. They'll tell you they're here to protect you, then deliver you back. I hugged Grandma's diary tighter. How do we know who's real? Rachel looked at me, dead serious. We don't. We test them, and we don't stop moving. That night at another safe house, a cute ranch owned by an elderly couple who'd helped girls escape. Something felt wrong. They were too sweet, too rehearsed. The woman brought me tea without asking how I liked it. The man called me by my real name before I told him. I stayed up, reading the diary under a blanket, while Rachel slept on the couch. Around 3 a.m., I heard him on the phone in the kitchen whispering, "Yes, we have Emma, the real one. We'll bring her in tomorrow once she trusts us more." My blood went cold. They weren't rescuers, they were bounty hunters. I slipped out the back door barefoot, diary under my arm, sprinting into the dark before they even noticed. My feet were bleeding by the time I reached the highway, but I kept running. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Then a car engine started. They were coming. I made it to a public library, just as the sun came up. My feet were raw, my hair a mess, my hoodie streaked with blood from where the gravel had cut me. Nobody looked twice, that's the thing about libraries. People mind their own business. I went straight to the back, logged into a computer, and typed in the emergency code Rachel had drilled into me. A green banner appeared on the screen. Verified safe contact. I typed fast, telling them everything. The chip Rachel had cut out, the fake safe house, the old couple's call about bringing me in. Within minutes, a moderator replied, "We lost track of you 36 hours ago. Stay put. Real pickup en route. Test code on arrival." I spent that day hiding in a study room, reading Grandma's diary again to keep from shaking. The pages about the fake network felt like they were written for me personally. Names of families funding both sides, helping girls escape while catching others. It wasn't paranoia. It was a playbook. Around 4 p.m., I used the librarian's phone to call the only person from my old life I still half trusted. Miss June, my high school counselor. She'd been the only adult who ever looked me in the eyes and asked if I was okay. Her voice cracked when she picked up. "Emma? Oh my God, is it really you?" I told her everything, words tumbling out. She was quiet a long time, then said she was coming right now, 8 hours drive, no discussion. I begged her not to, too dangerous, but she hung up anyway. That night, I curled up under a table between the stacks, the diary pressed against my chest, and thought about all the girls whose names filled its pages, the ones who'd been drugged, sterilized, disappeared. For the first time since running, rage burned hotter than fear. I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to burn it down. When Miss June arrived at dawn, she looked nothing like herself. Black hair dye, thrift store clothes, sunglasses, but her voice was the same. "Get in," she said, and I did. We drove for 2 hours before I noticed the black SUV 3 cars back. No matter what lane we switched to, it stayed there. Miss June's knuckles whitened on the wheel. "Your cousin's in that car," she muttered. I turned and caught a glimpse of Thomas through the windshield, looking like he was headed to church instead of hunting me. He raised his phone and smiled. Miss June flicked on her blinker, then swerved suddenly toward the next exit, the sign for a police station. "They want to frame me as a kidnapper," she said. "Let's see them do it in front of a uniform." My stomach dropped. Thomas wouldn't just walk away. He'd bring his papers, his lies, his polished smile. And for the first time, I wanted him to. I wanted him right there, where someone might finally hear the truth. Quick check-in before I jump back in. Some of you asked if I really went to the police station with Miss June, if Thomas actually showed up, and whether I had any proof beyond a diary. The answer is yes, yes, and no, at first. That's what made the next few hours feel like walking on a razor. I'm typing this now, with my hands still shaking. Because nothing about that day felt real until it was over. Miss June pulled into the police station parking lot like she'd done it 100 times before. Calm, decisive, like she owned the place. The black SUV hung 3 cars back, like a black cloud. Thomas climbed out of it with a folded folder under his arm and a smile that smelled of bleach and rehearsed sermons. He walked toward us like he was heading for Sunday service. We went inside. My throat had turned to sand. I kept Grandma's diary against my ribs, the edges raw from where I'd gripped it so hard I thought I'd tear the pages. Miss June's voice didn't waver when she told the desk sergeant we were there to report harassment and to request an escort because people were following us. That should have been enough. Instead, Thomas started in, smooth, practiced, papers flipping out of his folder like props. "This young woman has been influenced by a dangerous group," he said, spreading notarized evaluations and photos that painted me as unstable. "This counselor kidnapped her." Then he turned to me. "You're coming home, Emma. You belong home." Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the way his eyes didn't look like they'd ever held a child's face in fear. Maybe it was the memory of leather restraints and IV drips and that syringe in the hallway. I stepped forward with the diary and slammed it on the counter like a verdict. Officer Diana Torres took the book. She didn't smile. She read, page by page, and her face changed the way a sky changes before a storm. The way she held the diary made my hand steadier. She asked to see the documents Thomas had brought. She picked up a pile need, medical evaluation, and looked at the signatures under magnifying glass, like a jeweler. "That signature's been photocopied," she said softly. "This license is expired." She checked a database. "And this doctor was decertified 10 years ago." Her fingers tapped on a phone. "Someone call internal affairs, get me a supervisor and a forensics team." That was the first crack in their armor. Thomas tried to storm, tried to put on the angry husband, cousin clergyman act. His voice rose. He slammed his hands on the counter. He called for family rights. But the officers had already pulled security footage from the station, and a dispatcher flagged the black SUV's plate as associated with multiple harassment complaints. Someone had finally been listening. It didn't go clean. Thomas made a scene, sobbing like a martyr, calling the station corrupt and accusing us of lying. A reporter outside saw the commotion and started asking questions through a megaphone. On the sidewalk, a small group of older women, faces I recognized from family reunions, started chanting that I be returned to my loving family. They held signs with Bible verses and my high school photo. The world had split into 2 halves, those who believed the velvet lie and those who were finally paying attention. Diana had seen enough to put me under protective custody for my safety and to open an investigation into possible trafficking and fraud. She arranged for a medical exam right there at the station, x-rays, the chip removal report Rachel had filed, photos of old bruises Miss June had secretly taken months earlier. The forensics team found tampered documents in Thomas's folder and traces of sedatives on a pair of leather cuffs he'd brought for the ceremony. Before we left, Miss June pressed her forehead to mine and whispered, "You did it. You made them prove themselves." I believed her in that breath. The ride out of the station was surreal. A marshal-led escort, a van with barred windows, and a phone that rang every minute with threats and support in equal measure. They took me to a secure witness facility. Locked doors, cameras, the kind of place that smells like antiseptic and hope under pressure. I watched Thomas on a live-stream press feed demanding justice, while inside a detective uploaded our evidence. For the first time since the night of the dressing room escape, I felt like I had armor, corroboration, a law officer who wouldn't look away, and Grandma's diary sitting in evidence as a ledger of crimes. But the network was still out there, and the chant of my name outside the courthouse was only the beginning. They would not let this die quietly. My voice had opened a door, and now we had to make sure no one could slam it shut again. They moved me 3 more times after the police station. Safe house to motel, motel to a federal facility, with no sign out front. Each time, different agents, different cars, burner phones, swapped out like playing cards. But it was the first time in my life I felt like I wasn't just running anymore. I had walls, cameras, and someone on the other end of a phone line who believed me. Within weeks, the investigation blew up. Officer Torres and the federal agent she'd called in, Janet Rodriguez, built a case out of everything. Grandma's diary, Rachel's recordings, Miss June's photos, the sedatives found in Thomas's leather restraints. They started issuing warrants quietly at first, then all at once. My father and Thomas were both arrested on attempted kidnapping and conspiracy. The unlicensed doctor went into hiding but was picked up 2 states away. The traditional family network wasn't a rumor anymore. It was a federal trafficking case. I testified before a grand jury under a protective identity. My hands shook the whole time, but I forced myself to say the words. The basement, the charts, the IV drip, the dress. Thomas sat in the gallery in a suit, mouthing liar over and over, until the judge threatened to have him removed. When they played Rachel's audio recordings of him saying, "The basement is ready," and intensive correction into the courtroom microphones, 2 jurors wiped their eyes. For the first time, the burden wasn't just on me to convince people. His own voice was enough. The defense tried everything, calling me delusional, parading fake doctors with polished resumes, pushing how Emma is lying online. But every time they pushed, more survivors came forward. By the end of that summer, there were over a dozen girls giving statements, some from families I recognized at reunions, some from completely different states. Congress took notice. The law that had been a pipe dream, when Rachel first told me about it, was suddenly real. Emma's law, passed with bipartisan votes, forced genetic matching, and child marriage networks, now a federal crime with mandatory prison time. Thomas was stabbed in prison by another inmate before his appeal. My mother was finally convicted of conspiracy to commit child abuse and trafficking of minors for reproductive purposes and sentenced to 25 years. My brother took a plea deal after describing how the families traded daughters like baseball cards. Even Miss June testified, telling the court about her failed attempts to get child services to intervene. Rachel and I started working with vetted lawyers to build a legitimate escape network for girls still trapped. And me? I went back to school, under my real name. 19, unmarried, childless, and free. The 3 things my family swore I'd never be. I sat in a college classroom taking notes on social work, while my roommate complained about finals. My shoes were on the floor instead of my feet at night. I still checked the locks 3 times, still kept Grandma's diary on my shelf between textbooks, as a reminder, but I wasn't running anymore. Sometimes my phone buzzes with another emergency call, a whispering girl from Georgia or Utah saying her parents are planning a marriage. When it does, I pick up immediately. I walk them through escape codes, connect them to real safe houses, make sure they know the difference between our network and the traps. Every rescue chips away at what my parents built. Last spring, I drove back to the family cemetery. I brought fresh flowers in the diary and sat on the grass by my grandmother's headstone. "We did it," I whispered. "They can't hide anymore." The stone was just gray granite with her name, but I traced the letters with my finger, and thanked her for telling the truth, even when no one wanted to hear it. Outside my dorm window now, students walk to class without charts, bloodline lectures, or Biba reading calendars waiting for them. That's my revenge. I am exactly what they never wanted me to be, alive, independent, unclaimed, and choosing my own future.